Good afternoon, everyone. Gareth Presch, founder, CEO, World Health Innovation Summit. Delighted to welcome you to the Innovators Show, episode 9. I'm here with Angus Cameron, co-founder of ootiboo. And as always, we try and bring together thought leaders and individuals who are actually out there delivering good health and well-being. Angus, really glad you could join us today. Perhaps we could start off with sort of like a short introduction, and then we'll get into our questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Gareth. Thank you very much for letting me to talk today. And yeah, I co-founded ootiboo, which is a creative learning company, and we've been going for around about 3 years now. And my background is film, it's the film industry. And I left that partly for a well-being perspective after sleeping in the office way too many times, and thinking that I really want to be able to live where I enjoy where I live here in Folkestone. And from that changed, and I just went into the education realm. And when I started, it was very much about the creative journey that I had. But by doing this, I've really become very involved with the sort of the well-being aspect for children in what is a very challenging world at the moment. So that's sort of how it all began.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It leads us very nicely into like what inspired you to pursue a career in innovation, particularly in the health sector. So just some context, we met about just over a year ago in Malta on a bus. We were having a chat. We were going to the Green Vision Summit. Like what gave you that impetus to sort of move into the health sector?
Well, I think I've always been involved in innovation. So throughout my entire career in the film industry, I was involved in digital visual effects. So at the cutting edge of computer technology. Then when we were working in the 3D industry, the stereo 3D, where you put the old 3D glasses on, and then in virtual reality, which obviously has a big impact on the health industry as well. And going into the education world, seeing that there are a lot of challenges. I haven't been involved in education for a very long time. Obviously, I'm getting a little bit older, and my kids have all grown up. And to see the challenges there at so many different levels, from a creative, from an innovation, from a problem-solving perspective, but also from a well-being perspective, that with all these challenges that are around and the challenges that kids face. And what we wanted to be able to do is develop a program, which we are, in our early days on our journey here, but to be able to have a positive impact on kids in a very challenging time.
Absolutely. And you're taking quite a creative approach. Is there any defining moment, that sort of like throughout your journey that solidified your commitment to your current project? Like, what is it that set you sort of like, this is what I'm going to do?
It's a difficult one, that one, because I think it's a combination of events, a combination of observations of my life, of going into schools, working with kids, working with teachers, and seeing the challenges. And I think it sort of came to a point where going into schools and seeing, how important that generation is to solving the future problems.
Yeah.
And it just feels that they're not being supportive, and it's no fault of the schools or the teachers. They are just simply under-resourced, underfunded. They have no time, no money, no resource, and they're just trying to keep their head above water. And who gets impacted the most? The kids and those opportunities. And then throw on top of that what we're seeing on social media, how the world is changing, and the perception children have of the world. And I think if it's one thing, more than anything, it probably is just simply the world. The world is changing. It's a very uncertain place. It's a very negative place at times. And this is what are kids picking up? And I think that's got to be addressed.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about the innovation, what you're trying to achieve, what sort of problem are you trying to address? And how did you identify the need?
I think going into schools, seeing how creativity is very much an afterthought, and looking at how we can employ creativity as playful learning, which is what it is. And also this understanding that creativity isn't painting and drawing. That's just, if you ask any child, whenever we do a workshop, we will ask a child, ask the kids, what is creativity? And they will always say painting and drawing. And for us, it's to change that awareness for the kids, but also for the grown-ups in the room, to see how creativity is about problem solving and innovation. And that, though I come from a creative industry, in some ways creativity has been hijacked by the media, by the arts. The reality is that creativity is a core skill that all humans have. It's part of our definition. And I think it's really this need to develop content and projects in a way that we can use playful learning to engage children, to give them agency, and to give them that sense of resilience and direction to be able to utilize their creative skills to create a better future, which in many respects, I feel that my generation has failed a little bit on that one.
Yeah.
And, be it the environment or be that health or otherwise, these innovations are key to the future success of the species, ultimately.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. We have to take some ownership as well and some responsibility that we haven't been able to provide more for children. And there is such a vast need out there. And I think it's right across. I mean, when you look at the statistics and the figures, it does really paint a bleak picture. Particularly the trajectory that we're on as well. And we know the geopolitical space that we're living in at the moment. But how does your innovation improve, the current approach or the system in health and in education? I mean, I think you're addressing such a need here in terms of, bringing, education and health together, mental well-being. I mean, you're definitely putting a new spin on this from a creativity point of view. And also, it's not a negative; it's a positive.
I think best example is some of one of the projects that we've done. So we were approached by Bexley Council that were looking to do a program around about healthy eating and obesity. And Bexley has one of the highest rates of any of the councils in London. And originally, we were going to do a leaflet run. And talking to the education strategist, we said, well, could we create something a little bit more meaningful, have a bit more impact, go into schools, deliver workshops? And it's obviously a very tricky subject matter, because if you're talking about that, what you don't want to do is to effectively shame children due to that subject matter. So we developed working with public health from Bexley Council, we developed a workshop where we went into schools to tackle sort of the three sort of key areas, which is that healthy eating balance together with movement and the healthy mind supporting the healthy body. So those are the sort of three key areas for very young children. So this is for sort of key stage 1. So these are sort of 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And the way we delivered the content, so which was supported by a early years nutritionist, so we ensured that all our information was factually correct, and with some of the latest findings as well, to ensure that we were as up to date as possible. And the way we did it is we did it through working with unicorns. So the project, we used storytelling. Right. And we worked with HarperCollins, and they had Dave and Brave, who are unicorns from a book series called The Naughtiest Unicorn. And we were able to employ them to be the storytelling aspect to tackle the subject matter. So it's a deflection for the children. So the subject matter wasn't being forced on them or pushed on them. We were using storytelling as a way to engage them, and to engage them in a way that it wasn't pointing fingers in any way. And it was fun. And for that age group, they responded to it because it was fun. And I think this sense of playful learning, which starts in primary and reduces to the point where you get to secondary, you have no fun, and you don't have much fun when you grow up either. And playful learning is so impactful, and it's the best way to learn. And the more we can encourage that at all ages, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, I guess, and that's sort of, there's a couple of questions I wanted to ask, like how what impact do you envisage your innovation having on communities or global health? Because obviously you want to scale this, and you copy and paste and replicate this creativity model. Personally, I feel is going to grow, and it's a huge opportunity. And then also, like, how do you measure success or effectiveness of your innovation? What is a result for you?
For us at the moment, we're building an ecosystem. So for health and well-being, we are starting to build a range of projects in different areas, from dealing with sort of emotional learning through the healthy eating to other aspects. And we want to build that on scale. Now, we can deliver that as digital resources. So we have a platform, we can deliver to digital resources. The challenge is engaging schools. And as I said earlier, schools have no time, money, or resource. They have very little capacity, very little bandwidth. Where we have the most impact is if we're delivering workshops, because the schools like external organizations to come in. It's a great way to be able to work with the kids directly, but also give kids a voice as part of that process. And I think especially in the well-being area, specifically, especially some of the emotional well-being perspectives, that is really, really important. And I think that for us, we need to build this content ecosystem. So for a school, they have a range of different subject matter they can work with. But then where possible, we have elements that are workshops that we go into schools. So we're building those relationships. I think we live in such a world of disconnects and business, especially, this whole sense of, well, you download something, you do it, you don't have to talk to another human being. We have so much more impact when we're there with children, when we are learning as well. And that's the important thing. We're not developing something in isolation. We are learning from them.
That leads me very nicely into sort of the challenges and your learning experiences, because, what lessons have you learned from your journey? Like, what sort of, for an aspiring innovator who's out there looking at this program, what sort of advice would you share?
I mean, for us, one of the biggest challenges is how to engage with schools. So we have to create something, we have to innovate in a way that schools want to work with us. They want to bring us in, they want to engage. And that has been a real challenge. And I think it's also understanding timeframes. Yeah. I think, as a lot of innovators, you have a fantastic idea and you go, hey, we could do this tomorrow. And you rush ahead and you go, everyone's going to love it, they're going to do it. And I think what I've particularly learned over the last few years is that going into this market, into the education market, we need to build trust, we need to build relationships, and that takes time. We have over 200 schools from 20 countries in our network so far. And we have a handful of schools that really engage with our projects. One school has now completed, I think, 17 of our projects, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of schools that have maybe done one or none. And what we've got to learn is what is that combination of elements that will attract a school? Because for us, having engagement is the way that we get funding. Because importantly, everything that we deliver is free to the end user. It's free to schools, it's free to families at home. And I don't want to change that, because it needs to be inclusive. Education like this needs to be inclusive. And what we have to do, and one of our biggest challenges, is obviously attract funding. Because an investor will look at what we're doing and say, it's great, but what's my return?
Yeah.
There isn't a direct return. The direct return is in investing into the next generation that will be the problem solvers and the innovators that industry needs. And if you look at a lot of it, this constant thing of industry in general saying that, oh, we can't find the talent. And one of the problems is industry will engage with youth, but they'll engage with 16, 17-year-olds because it's close to the labor force, sort of, when they could move into the labor force. And the problem is that those kids have more or less decided where they are in the world. They're already, their ideas have been preformed through peer groups, through the education framework. And what education needs to do, and we've had some very interesting conversations with starting to see this, is that you need to start the conversation younger. Because if, for example, you're talking to a 9-10-year-old, they are developed enough to be able to make for decision making, but also are open enough where they can be excited about something. And if you can plant a seed and it could be turned into a passion, that passion, as they grow up, they can then take that into a career. And that's what happened for me at the age of 7 when I went to see the original Star Wars film. I walked out, told my mum, I want to do that. I want to go in the film industry. And I spent my childhood learning. And when I left school, I went into the industry and I spent 30 years in the industry.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, everything that you covered there about building trust. And I think that's, for aspiring innovators out there, one of the things I can recall being in Geneva at a conference a couple of years ago when there was a very successful business owner there, and he was explaining, it took him 7 years to break even, and it was the 8th and 9th year when he started to turn a profit. And at the time I was saying, wow, that's a long time, but actually it's not really when you think about it, because 7 years over the course of a 40-year career is not really that long. If so you've got to have that patience. When you talk about, children planting the seed, I totally agree with you. Industry needs to look at this. My daughter, who's 12 at the moment, 12-year-old, she's already thinking about what she wants to do. She's already looking at, and one of the things which kind of is encouraging her and her friends, they're interested in homelessness. They want to address these challenges, and they want to become artists, actually. That's sort of what my daughter sees as the future, which is creative, which is great. The funding situation is always a challenge. It's great that you're sticking to that model. In the future, sustainability wise, and future plans, you mentioned you have 200 schools at the moment. That's incredible. That's amazing work. So, what are your future plans, and how does this link into sustainability? Does it have an alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals, for example?
No, absolutely. I think that, from our side, we've got 3 core areas that we are focused on. So creativity is like an umbrella. It's the playful learning, it's the engagement. And we focus on real life learning, health and well-being, and climate education. So those are sort of 3 pots where our projects sit. And sometimes, obviously, a project can be in multiple pots in that way. And for us, I think that we really, the hope is obviously to build this sort of ecosystem of content that and a reputation and a name and a value that will bring schools. And we're seeing this already. We're starting to see schools that sign up because through word of mouth, through other references. And for us, it's sort of building up 3 core areas. It's building up the base, the network, the schools, as well as we do stuff at home as well. So engagement at home. Together with that, then as we build a larger base, and that will attract the funders to see the value of investing, because their funding can have a much greater impact to a wider reach. And through that funding, that creates our ability to create new content, which then feeds back into the platform to continue to grow. So we create this sort of circular approach. And for us to grow a network across the UK, to build cultural ties. We're in, having conversations in Brazil at the moment to build cultural ties potentially into the Amazon basin with schools, because children love to learn and understand what children are doing in other parts of the world. And I think that will become eventually an important part of what we want to do. But our sort of key focus at the moment is build a solid base within the UK, build the trust that we are a go-to destination within our 3 core areas, and being able to attract the funding that allows us to not only build meaningful content, but we can get it out on scale and get into schools and have that real impact. And I think that's where I'd like to see a lot of our focus going forwards, because that personal relationship in a very disconnected world, as I said earlier, I think is really important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, being able to, connect like the Amazon basin with, say, Manchester, for example, or Newcastle, because it's interesting, because I know my daughters, for example, they're sort of at that in school at the moment. They're coming home with pictures of the Amazon or pictures of Egypt or Africa, and they're trying to find their place in the world as well, and they're excited to sort of learn about children in different parts of the world. So I think that's really important. None of this can sort of come together unless you have like collaboration. You build a trust. Could you sort of like explain, from your perspective, how important partnerships have been in your innovations development? Are there any, key collaborators that you'd like to mention? And then what role do you think cross-sector collaboration plays like in driving innovation?
I think collaboration is absolutely key. If I was to describe ourselves as what we are, I would call us, or as one of my co-founders suggested, an entangled network. And I think that is absolutely key, not only as an individual organization reaching out to other parties, but those other parties then interconnecting, because everyone benefits, everyone grows with that. And we're working with quite a lot of, speculatively, with a lot of smaller organizations, with across all 3 areas. And the hope is, you have a better connection, a better relationship. You can build trust, much easier access. But as they grow, then you benefit. As you grow, they benefit. And as long as there's a sense of synergy, this sort of synergetic approach, then, and it needs to be both ways. Otherwise, you never have that engagement. And we've been, hugely fortunate. When we started the organization, we were supported by HarperCollins Publishers, one of the largest publishing houses in the UK and internationally, and through their children's brand, Farshaw. And to date, Farshaw have, through funding, but also through in kind for some of our competitions, have supported 14 of our projects. And that's really important, because that sends a very strong message that what we're doing has impact, because they could easily have walked away after the first or the second or the third. But we built this relationship, and the relationships we're looking at are long term. The education system, it takes time, and a lot of industry isn't very patient. And what we're looking at is a 5 to 10 year plan. Where do we want to be down there? And those relationships will be key. On the health and wellbeing side, particularly, I've been working with a very small organization called LHB Nurtures, which is Laura Brown. And she's now become an advisor of our board, and she's helping to steer and give us guidance for our sort of well-being ecosystem. And I think, that's really important. We don't have, I'm not going to pretend I have that specific experience in that area. I come from a different industry. So those collaborations are absolutely key. And flanked with that, with our well-being side, are two charities that we're working with, because we're a community interest company. It makes it easier for us to work with charities, because we're not fighting for the same pots of money. And we can do a lot of benefit. So one of them, who we've got a more established relationship, is Spark UK, which is a youth-led organisation for youth mental health. And we've already been working with them on they've advised on a couple of our projects. We've been working on some more competitions. And within their future plans, we're now building a strategy together to help bring their work into our ecosystem as a content platform to share to more schools, and also helping ootiboo to raise awareness through what they're doing. And the other partnership we're just building now is with the Buddy Bag Foundation, which is a really important organisation, a charity that packs rucksacks, little rucksacks with pajamas and books and puzzles and other activities. And these go out to displaced children in the UK who have been displaced due to domestic violence. And last year they delivered 6,000 bags.
Wow.
And the current estimate for children in the UK is 1 in 5 children are exposed to domestic violence or aware of a domestic violence within their family unit in some way, which is terrifying. That's 5 out of every class of 5 to 6 out of every class in a school in this country. And I think that it's a very sensitive subject matter. Again, it's obviously, you know, very key to our sort of well-being and real life learning aspect. But if we can utilize our skills, our creative skills, our storytelling skills to be able to raise awareness on what's a difficult subject matter to the point where a child might go, actually, that might impact me. I just never realized. And often that is the case. If we can help to support that, and we're developing a little project at the moment to start that relationship that is a way to engage children with children. And I think that peer-to-peer learning is and peer-to-peer sharing is so important. So that's just a couple of examples of some of the organizations we're starting to work with. And I'm really excited about it because I think there's a lot that we can achieve.
Well, you've just given great examples there of how to address these challenging, complex issues. It's not just a one size fits all. It's sort of like you've got to get in amongst the different agencies and come at it from different approaches. So I really like this approach. It's brilliant to see that collaboration. We're nearly at the end. Just some advice for aspiring innovators out there. Like, what would you give, what advice would you give to someone who's sort of like starting in the field of health innovation? I mean, you're also coming at it from an educational perspective. And then also the final bit, which you sort of touched on, like, how can young innovators stay resilient and motivated during the ups and downs of the journey? Because that's a real difficult question, because it's hard work being an innovator and also being an entrepreneur.
Hugely, absolutely. And I mean, resilience is used a lot, and it is relevant. I sort of get slightly wary of using that term sometimes. I think for me, it's patience. It's learning. I think it's being humble. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of people out there across a lot of industries that they know best, and it's listening. I think listening is very important. I think understanding that you will always learn. I'm 54 and I am learning as much now than as long as I can remember. And I think to innovate, you've got to be resilient. You've got to be patient. You've got to really believe in what you're doing. I've never seen myself as a salesperson, but I really believe in what I'm doing, and that's all that matters. And I think that, and generally as an innovator, you're coming up with something which is your baby. You should really believe in it. If you're not in the right game, I would say. And I think also what you can take away with is the small wins. So for us, when we get someone that responds to something that we've done, it could be just a little note, it could be it could be just something very small, but something where you've had an impact, that gives you the energy that recharges the battery, that when you find you've been unsuccessful in a funding bid, or you've lost some of your staff, or you just all the problems you face on a day-to-day basis, that what you need to do is recharge yourself with those little moments of impact that your innovation ultimately wants to achieve. And I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because like it's just those little things. They're not normally monetary at all. It's just like someone giving you a little bit of encouragement to say, you know, well done, just keep it going. Or, you know, they actually mean so much. And it does motivate you. Like it sort of like gives you a little bit of a nudge. Or if you get a nice message on LinkedIn or someone sends you a nice email, it just, I totally agree with you, Angus. I agree with you. You know, resilience is banded around a lot, but also at the same time, it's such an important part of an entrepreneur. Like, and you know, those who take risk, particularly in the social scene, like in terms of trying to help others, it amazes me how undervalued that is. Like it's sort of like, you know, corporate wise, banking wise, we take it for granted. It's got a value, but those who actually go out of their way and help others, which is what's really valuable in our society, we don't really value it. It's a strange way that we've kind of developed. Listen, last question. Where can we find out more, and like sort of your final message?
Final message is we really want people to invest into the next generation. We think that what we're doing is really important. We're part of a movement that's not just us, but part of a movement which I think is really necessary. You can find out more about us at ootiboo.com.
Okay, fabulous. Look, we put all the links in the chat for people who want to get in touch. Reach out to Angus on LinkedIn. This has been fantastic. Look, next episode is coming up is Dr. Laura Holland, co-founder of VeggieMeat, 30th of May. Join us. From myself and Angus, we just want to say thank you very much for joining us, and keep informed, keep up to date about the Innovators show, www.whis.world, and excited to see how this develops, Angus, and looking forward to working together as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.